Rep. Freiman. This is House Bill 56.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Thank you for allowing me to present House Bill 56. House Bill 56 is repealing the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. For the members who are not familiar with it, there's a council called the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. It's a council that is appointed by the governor, and it's a 17-member council. One of the members is actually the Assistant Secretary of the Workforce Commission. So there's really 16 outside positions. Of those 16, there's 5 general public positions, which is almost a third of the council. Currently, those 5 positions are the 5 appointees to the general public positions are 5 lawyers who represent injured employees. So as you can see, there's almost a third of the body of this commission or committee are lawyers representing injured employees. Now, why is that important? Because this committee reviews legislation, discusses legislation, talks about potential legislation, and then puts a stamp of approval and comes to the Labor Committee in both the Senate and the House and gives their recommendations. Well, if you have 5 lawyers representing injured employees, which is a third of the committee, rendering these types of decisions, it tends to be slanted and biased one side or the other. In this case, it's biased towards labor.
Let me ask you this, Representative. This advisory council was started during the general administration. Is that correct?
I think it was even before that. And I'm sure Mr. Patterson can give us the history on it because I'm not as well versed on the history, but I think it was definitely before the general administration.
Let me ask you this: during the general administration, we had a Republican governor for those 8 years. What was the makeup of the committee at that time, or the board at that time?
Again, I will defer to Mr. Patterson because I wasn't here and I wasn't able to go back and recreate that makeup at the time.
So I don't have to defer to Mr. Patterson. I know what the makeup was, and it was just the opposite way. It was mostly people from the defendant side, from workers' comp insurance companies, and people associated with them in one fashion or another.
But that doesn't make it any more fair.
So, but isn't your bill is to do away with this?
Correct,
this group.
Completely.
Why would we want to do away with an advisory board that represents so many different groups of people that can come give their input? I mean, they can't create laws, but they can come give their input and tell the legislature what they think is the best course of action to take.
Well, when they come to a committee and they put their stamp of approval on it as a committee, as a body, I think the committee tends to put some weight on what they're saying. And if you're right and it was slanted the other way, which was not, I would not be in favor of that either, then that committee's opinion is biased one side or the other. What if it was fair? If it was a fair makeup, even if it was just 3 plaintiff lawyers and 2 defense lawyers, that makes it more fair. It's all 5 are on one side. So again, if you were right and it was slanted the other way, I would be back here saying the exact same thing. And I've told Mr. Patterson and I've said publicly that if my bill doesn't pass and the next governor is a Republican and he stacks 5 defense lawyers in general public, I'm going to come back and bring the same exact bill because it's not fair. We need information that is non-biased as a committee. You do some workers' comp, I do some workers' comp, we understand it. Other people on the committee don't as much as we do, and they tend to want to utilize that information. And if that information is slanted one way or the other, it's not usable and it's not feasible.
All right, Steve, we have a question from Senator Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Freiman, has this resulted in any slanted legislation?
Well, I don't know what it's resulted in. I don't think it has at this moment in time, Senator Morris. The problem they're having is they can't even get a quorum. They've only met once this year, which is another issue. They've had 1 meeting in March. They've canceled the January, February, April, and May meetings. They're not even meeting. They're not even being useful at this moment in time. And I know there's going to be a bunch of red cards saying, we want it, but they're not even meeting. I mean, they almost become
They
irrelevant
have
and
that,
useless.
but my question was, has this resulted in any legislation? You said they're going to bring us slanted and make recommendations to this committee and other legislative committees for legislation. Has that resulted in any legislation that is not good or slanted or was passed through this body with based upon such bad recommendations, presumably?
I don't believe in the recent past it has, Senator
Okay.
Morris.
That's all I want to know.
Yes.
So there's been nothing bad come out of it in terms of legislation. Now, I've got a physician that lives in my district that is on it, and he conceded that since COVID, there's been difficulty having appropriate meetings, but he said it's been very useful for them to understand in the physician world what's going on in the workers' comp world. So there's an exchange of information and gives them a seat at the table, because they're usually just, the provider who ends up getting whatever he's given, and apparently whatever influence they've had has been pretty much zero in terms of legislation as far as the committee goes. But that's just my opinion. But
Well, Senator Morris, you're absolutely correct, and your doctor's correct. They do serve a purpose on this committee. I wish that the administration would have worked with me, and I've made the suggestion and just changing a couple of the appointments just to kind of make it fair. If they would have done that, I would have not even brought my bill or withdrew my bill.
yes, sir. Okay. Thank you.
All right, question about Senator Kathy.
What you're talking about making some changes? What changes did you propose?
Well, there's 5 general public positions. The rest of them
Are those the ones from the PSC?
Yes, from each PSC district.
Now, who? And I truly don't know the answer to this, which is probably a terrible move to ask a question on the answer to. But who makes the appointees of the PSC? Is it a PSC member recommendation, and the governor chooses from the recommendation, or does he just have to pick 5 people, a different person that lives in each PSC district? I don't know.
Senator
don't
Kathy,
know.
I'm not exactly sure how it's supposed to work, but
Yeah,
we
have a
have the
seat, too.
department here to tell us.
All right, so we have 2 folks that turned in white cards, Meredith Trahant and Tavares Walker, for the Workforce Commission, that will provide information if requested. So I guess you're being requested.
Good afternoon, everyone. Meredith Trahan, Executive Counsel for the Louisiana Workforce Commission. In response to your question, Senator Kathy, there are an application process on the boards and commissions website, and it's my understanding anyone who wants to apply for one of the positions or open positions on the Workers' Comp Advisory Council, they submit an application there, probably a CV, resume, and the governor chooses from that, or they can submit directly to the governor.
Senator Kathy.
Sorry. So, okay, so like, for example, Foster Campbell and Shreveport is not submitting a list of recommendations, and then the governor makes a choice. Like, so as the ag chairman, I have some appointments that I make recommendations, then the governor chooses from that. This is not like that. This is truly the governor makes the choice of the 5 members. They just have to live in those different areas.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're correct on that.
Okay.
And I guess more specifically, if you're alluding to whether or not LWC, OWCA, specifically whether or not we submit, we don't directly submit to the governor.
Okay. As you talked about the lack of a quorum, does that delay? I mean, that hadn't kept legislation from being authored, or
No, it does not.
Okay. Okay. All right. That was it. Thanks.
All right, Senator Freiman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to understand the genesis of this council. Was it a particular event, or what spurred the creation of this council to begin with? And if you know the year, that'd be, or anything around that.
Sure. Actually, it's my understanding it began in about 1983 when the Office of Workers' Compensation Administration was established as one of our state agencies.
But what was the reasoning behind of needing this council? I'm just trying to understand what the need of it is.
It's my understanding, and I've been with the office just about 13 years and worked primarily with Workers' Comp and Second Injury Board. And it's my understanding that the council itself is really a public forum that directly reports to the governor on legislation in the beginning. The statute also allows the council to make recommendations to the governor on rules, not laws. And it also discusses related workers' comp issues, trends, medical costs, any of those types of issues. Whenever we have the meetings, any public member or any stakeholder can come forward and request that an item be discussed for transparency and for openness. However, no decisions or rules or laws are made out of that particular council.
So this would have been Edwin Edwards. I mean, he won in '83. I don't know if that was under his administration or was it under Treen's prior to that, or maybe I'm just still trying to understand the need for it. But okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Trahan or Mr. Walker? Okay, we have some cards in support of folks that are wishing to speak. If y'all would make your way up, Jim Patterson with Law B. And I'll read in the other cards that are in support but do not wish to speak. Gary Patro with Louisiana Association of Self-Insureds, Carson DeLoe with ABC, and Will Dubas with the LRA. And I see that we have two cards from Jenny Valios. I'm thinking, Miss Valios, that you did the wrong color card and you corrected that? Okay. I'm so sorry. That's okay. All right, Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Good afternoon to you. I'm Jim Patterson with the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, and I regret that I have to come to the table in support of this legislation, but the chairman was asking about the history of this organization. As you all know, it was formed in 1983. It was under the Treen administration, and it was part of a lobby spearheaded reform initiative that was brought to the legislature and passed back then. The purpose of the council was to provide, as has been indicated, a forum for the various stakeholders within the system to come forward and to have input and to address some of the issues and the friction within the system, to come forward with recommendations for the governor, as it is indicated in the statute, for the purpose of trying to improve the system for the betterment of all, the employers and the injured workers that they insure in particular. The council did not function particularly well or often, if you will, from 1983 through the 1990s. The real point at which this council, I think, kind of got its footing was in the Blanco administration. At that time, I had developed a regard for and relationship with a plaintiff attorney by the name of Chuck DeVoley, may be known to some of you. Have a high regard for Chuck and always will. Chuck and I felt that it was a good time with the election of a new governor for us to promote the use of this council as a way to try and move the needle in a positive direction and in one that could be agreed upon by the stakeholders in general to make the system work more smoothly, again, to the benefit of all.
So let me ask you this, Mr. Patterson. My appreciation is that the council as it exists today was created in legislation by I don't know, I suppose he was then Representative Neil Reiser. No, I'm sorry, Senator Neil Reiser. And that legislation that the current council operates under was his legislation, and that was during the general administration. I know it was on the books before, but not in the form it is today. Is that correct?
The council has gone through different iterations by the addition of other members to the council that were not on it as originally confected. But no, it was not Senator Reiser's legislation that gave genesis to the council as we have it right now.
What I'm saying is the way it is made up now, it's clearly under that law. It is operating under the law that Senator Reiser brought and passed. That's the current law. Before that, it existed, but it didn't function. They really never met or anything else.
It,
for
it,
many,
it's-
many
it
years.
began functioning again under the Blanco administration without the advent of any legislation whatsoever, Senator. I can tell you that it was existent, and Chuck DeVoli and I had a good conversation about this often. That this needed to be created, or not recreated, but reestablished in terms of operationally, because during the Foster administration there were no appointments to the council. So
All right,
it has been operational for a good long time.
All right, so why don't you tell us why we need to abolish it? You have turned in a card in support of that. Why do we need to abolish it if it's needed and we put it in place?
Well, I think that it was definitely serving its function during the Blanco administration and the 2 terms of the Jindal administration. And contrary to what you're going to hear from some folks, it was balanced in terms of its composition. The group decided that it would take a 2/3 vote of the council in order to make any recommendations to either the governor or to the legislature when it came to any sort of action to be taken, and for that matter to the OWCA director. I do believe that for the most part, and I will tell you that there were parties on both sides that were not happy with some of the decisions that the advisory council made during those 3 terms that we're talking about. And in fact, there were some good things that came out of it. I will tell you quite honestly that from the business community's standpoint, the actions that were taken and the way that this council was reconfigured with this governor's administration is an indication of it being weaponized against the business community. That's how it's been taken. Whether you like it being characterized that way, that's how it was taken.
Give me a for instance. Tell me something specific that's happened.
Well, there has been legislation that that I have had to oppose in committee that came out of this particular council that was recommended and supported ultimately by the department, because that was the recommendation that came out of the council.
What recommendation was that?
I do not recall specifically. It was back in the last term, because this term, quite frankly, nothing has occurred because it's not taken seriously enough anymore by the legislature, such that they're willing to give credibility to it.
Well, you certainly got a lot of opinions today, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that have adverse opinions to that, but I'm really more interested in factual stuff because you can't tell me a single thing that came out of here that was detrimental, but you know there was something that happened. Can you give me some more facts that's on some of this instead of just opinions?
Now, Senator, I get that you don't necessarily appreciate my position on it, and all I'm doing is offering you my perspective and how the business community now perceives this council. I will tell you quite honestly that I've had conversations with business people and insurers about, if you will, returning the favor, that under the next administration they're going to advocate for the use of this in the same manner that it's been used under this current administration. I don't think that's good, and I don't support it, but I'm not going to stand in the way of it at this point. I'm getting tired. We tried to do things the right way, I believe, under the previous administrations, and I do think it was constructive, irrespective of how some people may feel about it. And I just think that anything that occurs now with this particular agency is going to be not at all constructive and unproductive and time wasting. I know of a number of people that have attended the meetings. I even attended them initially, and then when I realized that they were going to just basically be gripe sessions for individuals in the plaintiff's bar about how they perceive the system, I stopped going. I haven't been to a meeting since the first year of the governor's first term. This is honestly a situation where the integrity has been, I think, ruined. And in the view of the business community, this body cannot function adequately, and I don't want to see it used in the next administration in the same fashion, yet I fear it may be.
All right. Thank you. There are no questions.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Patterson, thank you for coming to the table. If y'all relinquish table, we've got lots of folks in opposition here. We have an email from Trey Mustian in opposition that we will put into the record. And we have 2 folks that want to speak in opposition, Jenny Valos and Robin Crumholt. If y'all make your way to the table, and I'll read the other cards in opposition. Mariah Bowen with LSMS, Lauren Bailey with Louisiana State Medical Society, Julie Cherry, Louisiana AFL-CIO, Chris Christensen with Smart TD AFL-CIO, Tim, is this Clifton? Louisiana Chiropractic Association? Chittum. Tim Chittum. Alton Ashley of the LSIP. Cindy Bishop, Louisiana Orthopedic Association, would provide information if requested, and Lewis Wren with the AFL-CIO will provide information if requested. All right, ma'am, if you'll state your name for the record, and then we'll hear your testimony.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Jenny Valois, and I'm an attorney. I have the pleasure of representing injured workers in our workers' compensation system. I'm not a trial lawyer. I only practice workers' comp, and so I take a little umbrage about everybody being lumped together. I wanted to let you know that when I first started coming to the Workers' Comp Advisory Council meetings, it was 2008, and we actually held the meetings at La B. And that continued for a number of years. The whole agency would troop down to La B, and they had the coffee and all, and we would.
Can I interrupt you, ma'am?
Yes.
I'm laughing, but
That's the truth.
that's the unslanted, unbiased group. They actually met at La B's office.
Yes.
I
sir.
don't
I was
know
there as
why
well.
they stopped, but I hope it's because I tweeted, check out where I have to go to meet the government in my state, because I'm a member of a huge national workers' comp legal community on Twitter, and you can follow me at Inspired Lawyer. So thank you. And so I tweet a lot about workers' comp in Louisiana. We talk nationally about it and what goes on here. So we, shortly after that, we started meeting in government buildings. And so I don't know the real reason, but we used to meet at La B, and I noticed nobody mentioned that. Aside from everything that was said here, I want to give you the practical rundown of why it's necessary in Louisiana and the value that it has. If you take a look at the agency's website, you will see that the public meeting, the notice board, has not been updated since 2016. That's because everybody who needs to know what's going on in workers' comp is meeting monthly, when we were meeting, at the advisory council. The medical advisory section of the website hasn't been updated since 2010. You're not hearing complaints about that because everyone who works in the system gets together. We know what's going on because the advisory council is where we can get together to do that. I have served on every committee that has been offered since I started in this. I have served on the pharmacy committee, the utilization rule committee, the opioid committee, the medical treatment guideline regulation revision committee, and I know that my comments and that my participation have been valued. It was frequently joked about that I must not be able to earn a living because I spend so much time in the regulation. I can't possibly have time to litigate for my clients. But that's the truth, because injured workers don't have lobbyists. They have lawyer voices who come here every year to tell y'all about what's going on and how your bills will be impacted. And so our voices are critical. I think that anytime we are lessening government transparency, we're walking a fine line. This agency does something that no other agency in this state does. It runs an entire independent, content-specific court. That is the number one concern for me. We have to have access to the agency to be able to question the things that they do with our court system. I was responsible and am party to a lawsuit filed against the agency in 2013 resulting from some constitutional violations. The first thing the 19th JDC judge asked me was, what have you done at the administrative level, Ms. Valois? What have you done to address this at the administrative level? I was able to say, I have participated in everything. We had so many Workers' Comp Advisory Council meetings about this. The agency could not say they weren't at the table. What the agency said was, we were all at the table, we disagree still. And that's going to happen. We're not going to always agree. Representative Dixon in House Labor in 2012, it was so contentious that we had to have an informal hearing in front of him. What's going to happen when you get rid, if you get rid of the advisory council, we have a lot of small but big issues in workers' comp. We're going to have to come and ask you for a place so that I can make a public record of what I think the agency is doing wrong, because I'm not going to have a venue. And I don't think we should have to bother y'all with those kinds of things. We use the council to and it's not a happy room. It's almost never a happy room. That's okay. We're all big people. But we do the meat of the work there, and then we come here and we take different positions, and that's okay. But we have to be able to work it out, and we have to give people a voice that's not paid for by business. We have a different interest.
All right, we have a question from Senator Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know what the makeup of the committee is as far as men and women?
I don't know the current
Counsel.
makeup. I know that we have that during COVID, everything changed.
Does that matter?
Honestly, I always think there should be more women in a room. I think there are never enough women in a room. That's the honest truth. I think we wouldn't be where we are if there were more
Let me
women
ask
in
you
every
this.
room.
Do you believe that
That's a fact.
that men have no place in governance going forward?
I did tweet that
Do you believe that?
on days. It depends on the day.
I see. So,
But I see you follow my Twitter.
Yes,
I think I follow you too.
yes. Men have proven that they cannot lead effectively. They have no place in governance going forward.
Yeah, I did.
So do you believe that about the governor? He's a man and has.
I believe the governor could have done a better job in what we're doing in workers' comp right now. I will not defend the agency.
I see. And so, you believe that maybe he shouldn't be leading going forward because he's a man. What about if you're the representative of the AFL-CIO and trying to effectively lobby against this? You think he should have no place in government either because he's a man?
I think that we should all have our words used against us like this in a public setting when we're coming to talk about people. So, yeah, I said that.
I understand. I'm just asking because you've castigated a whole group of people for no other reason than their sex.
Yeah,
and
the founding fathers did that.
That casts a lack of credibility upon you. Just saying. But in any event, I'm still going to move to defer this bill, but you may still change my mind at some point. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Question by Senator Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I was just interested. Do you feel like the board is balanced today in terms of the parties that have interest in workers' comp?
I feel like the board is not functioning right now because our system's in a free fall, but that is not the time to take away our voice. We have to have it going forward. There's got to be there. We have to have it when we get back on track. We're in a period of structural change. It doesn't matter what the reason is. When we're getting it back on track, we've got to all be in the room. And I think that the council gives us that place. There's nowhere else where we can do that. We have a lot of competing interests.
Do you think in the realm of workers' comp that business and industry has a role to play?
Oh, they absolutely have a role to play.
Yeah, I would agree
Always.
with that.
And self-insureds and insurance companies. Our system doesn't work without that. By the way, I'm a business owner. I have employees. I insure with LWCC. They sent me a refund too. I don't have a problem with that.
And I guess I'd say, you talked about paid business interests, but, I'm a small business owner myself, and serving in the legislature prior to this, I don't have the time or the means to participate in all those kind of forums, and so I pay dues to organizations that I demand pay people to be involved and advocate for business, and because I've seen a lot of abuses in the realm of workers' comp. I've seen a lot of abuses that come once people start litigating workers' comp that could have been resolved between amenable negotiation with employers in terms of finding reasonable reemployment opportunities and job positions for people after injury and that kind of stuff. And so I am concerned that that if we don't have a forum like that, which I do think is important, but has a balanced voice for all the interested parties, and I believe your position is a very strong interested party that's important, that can help bring meaningful change. As I feel the same way about organized labor, and I feel the same way about other business and industry, and I feel the same way about the medical practice. It's just important that we have a balanced approach if we are expected to make decisions based on their input and their feedback.
And I think the same is true in the rulemaking process. When we form the regulations that guide the workers' comp system, everybody's voice should be at the table. It's imperative. We have too much at stake.
All right. Anything else, Senator?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Krumholt.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. I've represented injured workers for 25 years. I've been one of those people that goes to the Workers' Comp Advisory Council. The last meeting, we went through all the bills that could potentially be heard, and I was able to be a voice for injured workers. Also, if you repeal the Workers' Comp Advisory Council, you're taking a voice away from the medical providers. It's very hard to find a doctor that will even accept a workers' compensation case. I've been told by one of our orthopedists that only 10% of medical providers in Louisiana will accept a workers' compensation case. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because business and industry is upset right now because the 5 general members are plaintiffs' attorneys, you didn't hear them coming forward during the Jindal administration when those 5 members at that time were representatives of business and industry. Injured workers traditionally just don't have the resources that business and industry do in trying to protect their rights. And over the years, the last 25 years, I've seen the rights of injured workers be restricted severely. And if the Workers' Comp Advisory Council is abolished, it's going to be removing the legislative intent of providing transparency to the governance of workers' comp-related administration and legislative policies. We need this forum because members of the public can come forward and address their concerns. Small business can come to these workers' comp meetings. We don't get to speak till after the council has discussed all the issues. They're not a rulemaking body. They're to advise the governor. There have been times where the Workers' Comp Advisory Council, I believe, was more effective. I do think the COVID pandemic has greatly hurt the effectiveness, but I don't think anyone in this room can say that any of us had any control over that situation. I was at the last meeting that was held. I thought it was very productive. I was able to speak to some of the orthopedists, the physical therapists. The doctors need to know what the injured workers' positions are as well. So I think the solution, if you're unhappy with the Workers' Comp Advisory Council, is to put more parameters on these 5 general appointments. There's a way to balance the Workers' Comp Advisory Council. Also, just to let you know, in 2014, a bill was passed, House Bill 765, Act 422, that ensures that the Advisory Council represents the diverse demographic and geographic makeup of our state. For years and years and years, Julie Cherry was the only female on the Workers' Comp Advisory Council. I don't care whether the council's 50-50 male and female, that's not my concern, but everybody does deserve representation. And there was a time when we didn't have any African American representatives on this Workers' Comp Advisory Council. And I really believe this legislation that was passed in 2014 did provide for a more fair, equitable, level playing field that we didn't have before. So again, I would ask that you oppose House Bill 56 because I think the current law does provide greater representation. I don't want to lose my right to have a voice in what's happening in the workers' comp system. I don't want the injured workers to lose any more of their rights.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We have a question about Senator Barrow.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really quickly, so you referenced a statute from 2014 that required that it has to be in concert with the demographics of the state.
Yes.
Does the board reflect that now?
I believe so. Yes, ma'am. We do have 6 females on the council now, and we have a good mix. There are more Republicans than Democrats, but there are 3 independents on the council. And I think everyone's concerns need to be addressed.
Can you tell me about the diversity as it relates to race?
Christina? Shannon Lindsay is on the council.
Mr. Walker now.
Mr. Walker, Al Perkins.
I believe that bill was done by, I asked Representative Pierre from Lafayette, to address that issue. It also said that the members of the council should be in-state people because we had some self-insured employers who were coming from out of state.
Why don't we answer the question? If y'all know, if you don't know, that's okay too. But if you know what the racial makeup is, what's the question?
I think there are at least
We have at
3
least 3
African
African-American members now.
Okay. So that's still not a third, but at least that's maybe better than where it was before.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so since that time, has the board been fulfilling what its intent was prior to COVID?
Prior to COVID, you can look on the website under the Advisory Council tab and see how often they were meeting. It was almost every month. You can also see the minutes. They're posted there, and you can see exactly what was discussed.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, the board is clear. There are no more cards in opposition or support. What is the will of the committee? Motion deferred by Senator Morris. Is there any opposition to that? And Representative, I jumped ahead of you. You certainly may come close if you would like to before we entertain that motion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I do want to give a brief closing. You've heard some good testimony here, but what you hadn't heard, and the question hasn't been answered, is it currently fair? And it's not fair. They didn't tell you that because they didn't want to tell you that. It is not fair. The makeup is imbalanced, and that's why this committee really should go away. But I brought this bill to shed light on that, and I think I've achieved my goal no matter what happens in this committee. I think the Senate House Committee has heard it, the Senate Labor Committee has heard it, and that was really what my goal was to do. So I appreciate y'all hearing this bill, and I ask for favorable passage, although that may not occur today, and that's okay. But I think we all know what this committee is made up of and how the bias is in this committee. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate you.
All right. There is a motion by Senator Morris to defer. Is there any opposition to that motion? Hearing no opposition, the bill will be deferred.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.